often happens in the small moments. These moments are the things that change our lives, that shape our lives, that make us into who we are. We're actually continuing a series we started last week on Easter Sunday called Close Encounters. And we're talking about these encounters, these moments that we have with Jesus, these moments that people in the Bible had when they came in contact with Christ. And it might have only been a brief moment. It might have only been a quick interaction, but that quick interaction changed everything for that person. And I believe that life change happens in a moment. Life change, we can often look back at these moments in our life and say, that's the point when everything changed. When that person said, you know what, I think you should go for that promotion. Or maybe when that person said, you know what, I don't think you're good enough. Man, life change happens in these small moments. Let's play the intro again. Awesome. Thank you, Bryson. I love you, man. But life happens in these moments of rejection. Anybody here like rejection? Raise your hand. No, of course we don't. Okay, a couple people like rejection. You got to be under 18, right? Nobody likes rejection. Nobody likes to feel rejected, man. I mean, you've been planning this moment for months. You've been saving up. Right, guys? You've been going to the jewelry store. You finally drop half a year's income on a ring. You find the perfect moment. And you kneel down and say, would you marry me? And she's like, I thought we were just friends. You don't get out of that too easily. We don't like rejection, do we? We don't like to feel like we're not good enough, like we're not rejected. In fact, around 3 years ago, when we were preparing to launch Thrive, I went to this thing that kind of helps you to know if you're ready to start a church, and they kind of do all these tests, and they do all this stuff, and it seemed like at the moment, everything in the world was coming against me. And we went out there, and they said, you know what? We don't think you're ready to start a church. And I was like, what? But I've already cut all my ties. I'm already moving forward. And I had to realize that even through rejection from a person, that doesn't mean that God is rejecting me. But sometimes we feel the rejection and we feel like God must be rejecting us too. We're going to take a look at a guy. I wonder whose coffee this is. No, I'm not going to drink it. I heard it's got a lot of sugar in it. We're going to look at the story of a guy, and this is from the book of Luke. And we're going to read the whole story here. It's like 10 verses. We're going to go through this line by line and look at this guy who is a guy that was often rejected. In Luke 19, verse 1, it says, Jesus entered Jericho. Now, Jesus was kind of making his last final journey. He had come from Galilee, which is probably 30, 40 miles in the north. He swung out west to Samaria. Now he's circling around through Jericho. And ultimately, he's heading to Jerusalem, where he will be crucified. So Jesus enters Jericho, and he made his way through the town. And there was a man there named Zacchaeus. And he was the chief. Say chief. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. Anybody here really like the IRS? You guys paid your taxes hopefully last week at some point, hopefully before that at some point in time. Nobody, now if you work for the IRS, God bless you, somebody's got to do it. But nobody generally likes to say, oh, I love taxes, I love my tax collector, all this stuff. Well, imagine this guy. He was hated in the community, probably the most hated guy around. Because unlike how you maybe become a tax collector in these days, back then how you become a tax collector was basically you had to find another tax collector and you had to bribe them to let you kind of into their territory. And as you'd work your way up, you get other tax collectors that are kind of working for you, and everybody's kind of taking a cut, and this is how this works. Now, the interesting thing is this, is that these were Jewish men and women, probably. These were Jewish people that were collecting taxes for the Roman government. The Roman government was an invasive government. They were oppressing the Jews, and here's Jews that are collecting money for the Romans. As you can imagine, they weren't the most popular people at the party. But what they did is that they made money, and they made a lot of it, but other Jews felt like they were being betrayed as a result. So here's Zacchaeus. He's a chief tax collector. This means like he was the boss. He was the guy that had other tax collectors working on it. This is kind of how tax collecting would go. The Roman government would say, we want, say, $100 from every person in this region. So the tax collectors would go around, and they needed to pay the Roman government $100. But anything they charged over and above that, they got to keep. So they would go up to people, and they'd say, you owe $150 in tax. Well, it's kind of common knowledge that that wasn't really what they owed, but hey, they had nothing they could do about it. There was no letter in the mail. There was nothing that said, this is how much you actually owe. So they would have to pay it, and then folks like Zacchaeus, the other tax collectors, would take the $50 off the top, and they would give the $100 to the Roman government. Palestine was broken up into 3 basic tax districts, and Jericho was a very important one. And here we see Zacchaeus was the chief tax collector in Jericho. He is the main man. He is the big boss. He's not just a tax collector. He's the guy with the nice house on the hill. The guy that drives a brand new Tesla to work every day. He's got the big screen TV. He's got lots of money. He's loaded. He's got everything. But write this in your notes that there's not enough money in the world to make up for a lack of relationships. Not enough money. He's got plenty of it. But there's one thing that Zacchaeus lacks. He's hurting. He feels rejected by his own people. He's hated, he's despised. And if you looked at Zacchaeus from the outside, man, it seems like he's got everything all together. He's got it all together. He's loaded. He's got everything he could ever want. But inside he's hurting because he's just putting on a show. He's just putting on a show. He's throwing lavish parties, but people only come because they want the free food, because they know Zacchaeus is loaded. Story about Zacchaeus is interesting because Zacchaeus wasn't called as a disciple like many were. Like Matthew and Mark and John and James. They were all called specifically by Jesus, said, come follow me. And he also didn't have anything really wrong with him. He didn't have a physical need. People flocked to Jesus because they were hurting, they were sick, they couldn't walk, they had a disease, and they wanted Jesus to heal them. But Zacchaeus, well, he didn't have that, but what he did need was he did need Jesus. And sometimes, on the outside, we probably look kind of like that too. Like we got it all together. Like social media, right? You get on social media, man, it looks like everybody's got everything together. I mean, man, it's like like we homeschool our kids. And we have friends that homeschool, and sometimes they'll post these nice pictures of the kids like smiling and reading books and studying. I'm like, it's not like that in my house. Like, I must be doing something wrong, because they're like, one of them's crying over in the corner, the other one's saying, I hate school, and like, I don't know, like, but yours looks so nice, looks so peaceful. And we post things like that, and it seems so happy, and people have so many followers on Instagram. But the reality is often we don't even like ourselves much of the time, because we've created this image that's not real. And Zacchaeus was probably wrestling with thoughts like this. He seemed like he had it all together. He was the man of the year. He was the most wealthiest guy in town. Man, he's loaded. He's got everything anybody could want. But inside, something was missing. I wonder if you've ever felt like something's missing in your life. And here's Zacchaeus. And he has this thought, I wonder if maybe Jesus could help with this. Maybe Jesus has something to fix this issue. And in verse 3, it says he tried to look at Jesus, but he was what? Too short to see over the crowd. He had a problem. Let's be politically correct. He was vertically challenged. There was a song. If you went to church as a kid, you might have sang this song. Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. Who wrote that song? If you see a man that's short, do not call him a wee little man. Unless if you're in Ireland, maybe. I don't know if it's acceptable there. Probably not even acceptable there. Do not call another human being a wee little man. And don't make your kids sing about the wee little man. That's just embarrassing. Zacchaeus was a wee little man. Most likely somebody that he was made fun of. Probably picked on. People probably laughed at him. Probably in the back of his mind, he's like, well, you're not laughing now, because now I'm the one driving the Tesla. I'm the one in the nice house. I'm the one with all the goodies. But inside there, you still feel that hurt. You still feel that rejection. So what do we do when we feel rejected? Well, on social media, we post another picture and say, will you like it? Will you like it? Will you like it? We can run to the people that hurt us and hope that maybe this time they'll accept us. But instead, what Zacchaeus did is he decided, I'm going to run to Jesus and see what he has to offer. I wonder if you feel like Zacchaeus, like you ever don't measure up. Like you don't measure up to everybody else. Like you feel inadequate. Like I'm just not quite good enough. Everybody's rejecting me. I just don't quite measure up. People are always judging because of our appearance, judging because you're too tall, you're too short, you're too pretty, you're too ugly, you're too fat, you're too skinny. They're judging you because of your hair. They're judging you because of your skin color, judging you because of your nationality, judging you because of, all kinds of things, where you work, where you went to school. We're always judging people. And Zacchaeus was kind of sick and tired of it. And he just wanted to have a little bit of hope. So in verse 4 it says, so he ran ahead and he climbed a sycamore-fig tree. And that was beside the road. For Jesus was going to pass that way. So he's trying. He's hopping up and down. He's trying to see through. And people are blocking the way. And probably when they noticed who it was, they're probably like even more blocking the way. Like, hey, Zach, get out of the way. Get out of the way. Get out of here. And so Zacchaeus takes off running. Now, the thing you need to realize is normally we don't see people running, do we? I mean, unless if they're doing it for exercise. But normally we don't see people running unless if you're in the airport or something. And then we'll occasionally see people running. But in the Jewish culture, it was not considered dignified for a grown man to be running. For a lot of reasons. One, they were wearing robes. And who knows what's going to happen with a robe when you take off running. A Jew wouldn't be found climbing a tree. Probably for much the similar reason. You don't want to be climbing a tree in a robe. Zacchaeus, though, write this in your notes, was willing to be undignified in order to get the attention of Jesus. He was willing to be undignified in order to just get a peek at this person coming through that he'd probably heard rumors of. He'd probably heard stories of. He might have even heard about Matthew, who was a tax collector, and how he's part of the squad. And he's like, I just want to see him. So I don't care what people think. They don't like me anyhow. So I'm going to run. I'm going to climb the tree. Who cares about the robe? I'm getting up there because I want to see Jesus. And sometimes we need to reach for Jesus. Sometimes we need to dig through something in order to find Jesus. Sometimes we need to run through a difficult situation in our life. We need to run around some obstacles in our life in order to see Jesus. Sometimes we need to climb over some things. Sometimes we need to get up and move and get around and dodge and weave and climb up in order to see Jesus. Maybe we're facing an obstacle. Maybe we're facing doubt. Maybe you're facing discouragement, insecurity, and rejection. And it's time that we need to climb up and climb over so that we can see Jesus. We need to run through that doubt. We need to dig through the insecurities that come at us. We need to climb over the fears, and we need to pursue Jesus with whatever it takes. Maybe you've been passive in your life towards Christ. And maybe it's time to run to Him. To run around the things that have been blocking you. To climb up to get a better view. To climb over the obstacles that get in your way. We all have obstacles that try to get in our way. And maybe it's time to be a little undignified. And I'm going to climb up this tree because I have hope that maybe this guy can help me. So here's the promise. If you seek Him, you'll find Him. If you pursue Him, He'll reward you. He'll reveal Himself to you. Now the interesting thing is this, is that Jesus is walking with this crowd of people and He's going through, and then He picks the most unlikely person in the crowd. You know, it's interesting too, how God meets our needs, isn't it? Think about this. Long before Zacchaeus was ever in the position where he couldn't see Jesus, there was a tree that had been planted. That was there. The provision was already made. It was already there for him to climb to see Jesus. And he just had to run. He had to be a little undignified. And he found it. And he gets up there and it met his need. And in verse 5, it says, when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by what? By name. He didn't say, hey you. Hey, wee little man, come on down from that tree. No, he said, hey, Zacchaeus. He said, quick, come down. I must be a guest at your home today. Jesus stops him. He knows his name. He knows who he's talking to. It's not just another face in the crowd. He's like, Zacchaeus, get on out of that tree. We're going to have a party at your house. Scripture says that Jesus knows the sheep. And he calls them by name in John 10:3. The second part of the verse is he calls his own sheep by name and he leads them out. But here's the interesting thing. Zacchaeus, he had heard a lot about Jesus. He wanted to see Jesus. Write this in your notes. Zacchaeus knew about Jesus. But Jesus knew Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus knew all about him. But Jesus looked and said, hey, I know you. You're Zacchaeus. You're the one that's the chief tax collector around. You're the one that everybody's been rejecting for so long. You're the one that no one wants to hang out with. Hey, you, Zacchaeus. Get out of that tree, man. What are you doing up in that tree? Let's go to your house and have a party. We're done here. Let's go have a party. I wonder if you've ever felt Jesus calling your name. Calling your name, speaking to you. Saying, come on down. Come over here. Let's hang out. Let's spend some time together. Zacchaeus had probably been called many things in his life. Probably been called all kinds of horrible things by all different kinds of people. But Jesus, He calls him by name. Zacchaeus. You know what the name Zacchaeus means? It means pure and righteous one. Pure and righteous one. Zacchaeus probably wasn't living up to his name. People might have made fun of him, but Jesus, hey, you, pure, righteous one, get down out of that tree. We're going to have a party. Nobody called him that, but Jesus is calling him that. Sometimes you may feel overlooked. Sometimes you may feel ignored in your life, but Jesus sees you. Write that down. That you might feel ignored, but Jesus sees you. And He wants to hang out with you. He wants to go to your house. He wants to have a relationship with you. So what does Zacchaeus do in verse 6? It says he quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But guess what? The people were very displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. Oh my. Here's a person who had been rejected all their life. And you know what everybody expected Jesus to do? They expected Him to reject Him just like they had been doing their whole lives. And then they're ticked off when He doesn't. They're like, oh, look at Jesus now. Man, you should know what kind of a person He is. He's a notorious sinner. Not just a sinner, but everybody knows He's a sinner. Everybody's watching. Here's Jesus, though, and he might be the Messiah. That's what they're all thinking. And now here, He wants to go to Zacchaeus' house? Who would want to go there? They're like, no, you got the wrong guy. Go to this guy's house. Go to Samuel's house. He's a good guy. He goes, to synagogue every week. But no, Jesus picks out the debatably worst person in the crowd and says, hey, you up in the tree, I'm coming to your house. Why? Because that's who He came for. He didn't come for the healthy. He came for the sick. He didn't come for the righteous. He came for the lost. He didn't, just come for the people that had it all together, thought they had it all together. He found the most unhealthy people, the most despised people, and He said, I am coming with you to your house. You've been rejected your whole life, but I see value and worth in you. This is one of my favorite shirts. It's Atlanta Braves. I'm not an Atlanta Braves fan. In fact, I know very little about the Atlanta Braves, except one piece of information that you might not know. I'm pretty sure they're from Georgia. Regardless, I don't know much more about the Atlanta Braves, but there's an interesting story behind this shirt. I think it's interesting. I'm not the original owner of this shirt. Somebody at some point in time had purchased this shirt, I'm sure, and they thought that they didn't want it anymore, so they threw it away or they donated it. And I happened to stumble upon this gem at a Goodwill, at a thrift store. This is long before Macklemore knew what a thrift store was, before he even was cutting his adult teeth. I was going to thrift stores looking for shirts that had interesting graphics that were distressed ink, because nobody was imitating this back then. If you wanted a shirt that looked like it was old, you actually had to buy an old shirt. And so I went and I found this shirt, and I didn't care about the Atlanta Braves. They might have even changed their logo. I don't know. This one's from 1988. But I saw it, and I liked it, and it was soft, and I wanted this shirt. And when my wife and I were seeing each other before we were married, I don't know, this is back before we had Snapchat and we could send pictures of ourselves every 12 seconds. So in order for her to remember me, I gave her this shirt for a while, because I guess it maybe smelled like me, and hopefully that wasn't too bad of a thing. She still married me. Yesterday we had our 17th anniversary, so she stuck around. Regardless of my obsession with old, slightly shredded shirts. And I've kept this shirt. After we got married, she gave me back the shirt, which I was really grateful for. That's not why I married her. I didn't marry her to get the shirt back, but it was part of the bargain, that I get my shirt back. And I love this shirt. I still love it. And eventually, as some of my favorite shirts have done, they end up missing at some point in time. And I asked my wife what happens to them, and she denies everything, but I don't know. They disappear. But the shirt has a certain sentimental value because of the fact that we kind of shared it, and she had it for a while, and I used to wear it, and I still like to wear it. She doesn't let me wear it in public, but I do wear it around the house. And it's something, though, the whole point, there's a point to this, I think. Like, why is he talking about this shirt? It's something that was rejected. Somebody else said, that's not quite good enough anymore. The ink is getting too faded. Little did they know, I was looking for shirts with faded ink for some reason back then. I don't know. And now, like I said, people think it's cool. But back then, nobody really thought it was cool. And so I went and I found it. And it was something that someone discarded. Where I said, okay, I see some value in that. And then something that now has a little piece of my wife and I's history together. Something that we say, oh, that was kind of corny of us to do maybe, but it was a way that we could think of each other and whatever else. Jesus sees a person, though, that was rejected by everybody else. He says, hey, man, I want you. Everybody's like, no, he's a sinner. He's a bad guy. But you know what's interesting? Write this down. That God doesn't distinguish between different levels of sin. And when Jesus looked into the crowd, all he saw was notorious sinners. All he saw was people like you and me, people that didn't measure up. And here's a guy that knows it. Here's a guy that realizes he doesn't measure up. I'm going to go hang out with him. I like people like that realize it. There's no rating system. Everyone around is mumbling and grumbling and complaining and gossiping. I can't believe Jesus would do this. This is so shocking. This is scandalous. They got the National Enquirer out there snapping pictures like, oh, Jesus is going to Zacchaeus' house. Oh, my goodness. And everybody's gossiping. It's on TMZ. Everybody's all upset. And everyone's like, this guy deserves rejection. And yet Jesus is saying, I found some value here. Jesus doesn't give him what he deserves. Kind of like when we turn to Jesus. Kind of like when we climb over the obstacles that we face in life. Kind of like when we say, hey, I just want to get a glimpse of Jesus. And he looks at you and says, hey, you. I'm coming to your house. Don't worry about but God, you don't know what I did. I know what you did. And I'm coming to your house. I want to be with you. I want to hang out with you. And D.L. Moody, he was a great minister years and years ago. And he said that Jesus was saved in the time it took him to get from the limb to the ground. By the time he got from the limb to the ground, he's like, I've been accepted. I'm no longer rejected. He went from being the despised person to hosting the party for the King of Kings. And in your notes, put this down, that in a matter of moments, you too can be transformed by God's grace. You can be transformed. You can be made new no matter how bad you are, no matter how far you've wandered, no matter what things you've done, no matter who you've hurt, no matter who's hurt you. You can be forgiven. You can be restored. You can be accepted. You don't need to be rejected anymore. Because Jesus says, hey you, I see you and I accept you just the way you are. So what changed about Zacchaeus? Was it a bunch of new rules he had to follow? Was there some new duties he had to do? Did he have to live up to a certain set of guidelines? No, it was just a moment with Jesus. That moment where Jesus saw him and said, I accept you. And if we could hear Jesus right now, he would be looking at each of us, wherever we are, hiding behind whatever we're hiding behind, doing whatever we've been doing, whatever we did last week. He's like, I know, but hey, you, I accept you. You're not rejected anymore. I accept you. Because Jesus is not your accuser, he is your rescuer. He is not coming to accuse you. He's not pointing the finger. The Bible says the devil is the one that accuses. Well, I just always feel like I just see all the bad things I've done. Well, guess who's pointing that out? Because it's not Jesus. Because Jesus said, I accept you for who you are, regardless of what you've done. And there's going to be a party at your house. But first, Zacchaeus has an announcement to make. He's like, Jesus, can I have the mic for a moment? Verse 8, meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, I will give half of my wealth to the poor. And if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. Talk about a transformation. A person who was greedy. A person who lived only to gain money. A person who lived to take advantage of people financially. And he's saying, Jesus, before we even get to the house, I know you haven't even done anything yet, but I just climbed down out of that tree and half of my money, I'm giving it to the poor right now. I mean, in Jewish customs, you were thought to be a really good person if you took 20% of your money, 20% of your income, and said, I'll use it to help the poor. And Zacchaeus said, I'm not going to be bound by that. I'm giving half of all I have. And if I have cheated anybody, and I'm wondering, like, you probably did, Zacchaeus, you know? Like, let's be honest. But he's like saying, well, if I have, and let it be known, if I've cheated anybody, you can come see me at the party, and I'll give you 4 times whatever I cheated you. Now, in Jewish law, if you cheated somebody, all you were required to do was give them whatever it was you cheated them back plus 20%. If you stole something, you were required to give it back plus a double amount. Nowhere were you required to give it 4 times, in the exception of if you stole somebody's cow and the cow died. And that wasn't the situation. And Zacchaeus is saying, I don't care about the law. I don't care about the rule. If you feel like you've been cheated, come see me, form a line, and you're getting 4 times back. Whatever. From the limb to the ground, he was transformed. He was now generous. He wasn't trying to get the approval of Jesus. Why was he doing this? Because he realized for once in his life, he already had the approval. He already had the approval. And as a gesture back, because Jesus already approved of him, he says, I'm going to do something for you. In your notes, we don't do good things to gain God's approval. We do them because he already approves of us. He wasn't being motivated by the law. He wasn't being motivated by this. He was being motivated by God's extravagant love to him. And God's extravagant love towards us deserves an extravagant response. Because when you're transformed by Jesus, you might start doing weird stuff, man. You might start doing weird things. You might start doing things that you never thought you would do before. This is not a behavior modification. This is not saying, oh, you got to clean up your act. You got to act this way. This is God transforming from the inside out. Nobody's saying to Zacchaeus, hey, man, you need to be generous. No, Jesus transformed him from the inside out. And he's responding to God's love. When you're transformed, you might start doing weird things. You might start forgiving people. You might start loving people that are unlovable. You might start helping people that are in need. You might start caring for other people. Why? Because that extravagant love deserves an extravagant response. God's extravagant love deserves an extravagant response. Zach did not need to gain the approval of Jesus. This is how he responded to Jesus' approval. In verse 9, it says, salvation has come to this home today. For this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who what? Who are lost. Who's lost, man? All of us have been. He came to seek and save the lost. But sometimes Christians, church people, get weird with that word. And we're like, oh, we got to go save the lost. And you go out and say, hey, are you lost? And they're like, no, I know where I'm going. So let's think about it like this. Jesus came to seek and save normal people. Normal people. People like you and me. Normal people like Zacchaeus. Jesus came to seek and save those who have an emptiness inside. Jesus came for normal people. He didn't come for people that were already found. He didn't come for the righteous. He didn't come for the healthy. He didn't come for those that had their act all together. He came for sinners. He came for people that realized, hey, I screwed up. My life is not as great as it should be. And you know what? I'm in need of some help. I got to dodge the crowd a little bit. I got to run ahead. I got to be a little undignified, because if I don't, I might miss my opportunity to see Jesus. I'm going to climb that tree and I see him, and maybe he'll notice me, and then he looks in my eyes and says my name. Imagine that. He says your name. I see you and I accept you. That's what he's saying to us now. And what's our response? Do we accept him? Do we accept him? Do we allow that interaction to change our life, to transform us in this moment? Do we allow this close encounter to shape us? Or do we just say, no, I'm good? Zacchaeus allowed it to change him. Man, when he says, I accept you, we should look right back in those eyes and say, I accept you too. Let's pray. Father, we come to you. We thank you for your word. We thank you for the story of Zacchaeus, who reminds us that how we may feel like we don't measure up at times, when we feel like we've been rejected and abused, used up, tossed away, that you are good. You see through what everybody else sees. You found what everybody else discarded, and you said there's still some value here. We come to you. We thank you for that. And those of us here that maybe you're in a point in your life where you've been trying to do all kinds of things. You've been trying to fill voids with education and work and relationships and substances, perhaps. Maybe you've even been in church for a long time and you're just going through the motions. Jesus sees you right now and he's calling you by name, saying, let's hang out. I accept you. Do you accept him? And if you do, Scripture says that we believe that Jesus has been raised from the dead. Now we just need to say with our mouth that Jesus is my Lord. And if that's where you are, say it loud, say it bold, that Jesus is my Lord. And I accept you. Take my life. Give me your new life. Transform me from the inside out. Make me more like you. Lord, we thank you for your goodness to us. We thank you for the power to transform us, to make us new. In Jesus' name, amen.